Speaking of the United Nations, despite a bipartisan effort, a UN treaty protecting the rights of people with disabilities will have a tough time getting the necessary votes when it goes to the Senate floor today. Yesterday on our show, two of the treaty's most prominent supporters argued the issue is misunderstood, misrepresented, and mired in old UN politics.
This treaty extends to some 650 million people with disabilities around the world. The rights and opportunities guaranteed by our Americans with Disabilities Act, that's the model. Opponents of the treaty, Chuck, either misunderstand or choose to misrepresent what it's about.
We always knew it was going to be a close vote because it's caught up in UN politics.
Well, let's bring in our Tuesday gaggle. Tripp Baird from Heritage Action for America, a group that opposes the UN Disabilities Treaty, Democratic pollster Margie O'Meara, and Nathan Gonzalez from the Rothenberg Report, and Roll Call. So, Tripp, as promised, yesterday we were speaking with some folks at Heritage Action. You guys wanted to explain, give you a proper forum to explain your opposition to this treaty. So, why do you oppose this treaty?
Well, we appreciate you having us on. Well, your guest yesterday, Governor Thornburg, said that this would extend the ABA to 650 million people around the world. Actually, that's not true. He ended up, if you replayed what he said, he actually contradicted himself, and he said it's really not that binding. There's nothing to see here. Why shouldn't, no one should oppose it. The story everyone needs to understand is we've been a leader in the rights for disabled around the world. We will not actually sign the treaty. Will give leadership to some so-called experts on disabilities in Geneva every year that tells us what to do. So I think there's a sovereignty issue there. We don't need to seek leadership. We've been the leader on this issue for
But isn't
decades.
there a sense of where the American business community should know that there's a level playing field when it comes to, so here in the United States, they know they have to abide by the ADA Act. Sure. Why shouldn't they know that that they're doing business in the same way around the world?
Well, other countries that want to give rights to the disabled are free to sign the treaty and get to work, pass the same laws we've passed over the last 20 years. So I think there's nothing stopping these countries from doing this anyway. It's not, us signing this treaty does not bind any country or make any country do anything. So we don't really see the point in the treaty other than giving these experts more authority.
Are you going to win? Do you think you've got the vote?
I think we're going to win. I think we're about 4 or 5 votes ahead of them right now, and so I think I'm not predicting it just yet. We'll know at noon.
Nathan, what's interesting here, and you follow the Senate politics pretty closely, is that what we're seeing is sort of a growing divide inside the Republican Party between sort of the old foreign policy guard, the Dick Lugers, the John McCains of the world, versus this new foreign policy guard. Some of it's led by John Kyle, who's not an isolationist, if you will. There is some isolationist views there, but it's an interesting divide that's sitting in the Senate.
Right, and in some ways it's not even a divide anymore. Some of those senators aren't even a part of the caucus anymore. But I think with this issue, part of it is that, to say that there's skepticism, overall skepticism about the UN among some of the Republican Party, was probably an understatement, and I think this just digs, deeper into some of that, deep-rooted skepticism of the body in general.
All right, I want to move to fiscal cliff here. Margie, there's a mix of public opinion and public policy here. Democrats feel as if they're winning the public opinion war, but that isn't going to get them 218 votes. So at what point does winning the public opinion war sort of become diminishing returns?
Well, I don't think it becomes diminishing returns. I mean, you see consistently that the exit polls show that people not just support President Obama, but support seeing the wealthy pay a little bit more in taxes. Half of the electorate said that. An additional little bit said everybody should pay a little bit more. So a clear majority said that. Consistently, Washington Post poll showed right after the election and again now that more people would blame Republicans than the president if there is no deal. So I think Republicans need to really tread carefully. Look, I think it hurts everybody politically if we go over the fiscal cliff, but ultimately Republicans are going to pay a larger price. So it's about making sure they don't drive themselves off a middle-class cliff by digging their heels in to have lower rates, actually have lower rates for the wealthy than we have currently.
Now Tripp, you work for a group who's, you're trying to say, hey, we stand for principles, but you're not there to win elections. You're there to win policy fights. But the fact is, if Republicans could be, some conservatives could be pulling Republicans away from being able to win swing voters. What do you say to that?
Hopefully good policy makes good politics. In this case, say we concede the tax issue, but that's not going to fix the problem. The drivers of the debt, or what is spending, but also is entitlements. And Boehner punting, basically capitulating to the White House yesterday in his letter, saying we're not going to take
a capitulation, and the White House doesn't even call it a serious proposal.
Again.
I mean, that's a pretty.
Well, we're all going to put our heads in the sand and say that entitlements aren't the driver of the deficit. And our long-term fiscal cliff is. I mean,
you don't think
some
he put
people
enough
think we're already
detail?
off
He
the
put
cliff.
entitlements there. You don't think he put enough detail on entitlements?
No.
Well, that'll be interesting to think. We'll get him to answer that question when